Hey YouTubers, welcome to the Cyber Overwatch channel. I am Pragmatic One. In this video, I will be doing a walkthrough of TryHackMe's Skynet vulnerable host. This is a beginner to intermediate level room themed around the Terminator franchise, and it covers some really practical techniques you'll encounter in real-world assessments. Let's get into it. In this walkthrough, I'll cover the complete attack lifecycle, reconnaissance, enumeration, exploitation, and post-exploitation. Specifically, I'll perform port scanning, SMB enumeration, web content discovery, credential brute forcing against a webmail client, remote file inclusion, and privilege escalation via a misconfigured cronjob. If you find this content informative and you are interested in cybersecurity, please like and subscribe to the Cyber Overwatch channel. Also, for more free content, please regularly check back on www.cyberoverwatch.com. Skynet is a vulnerable host created by TryHackMe. It simulates a corporate Linux server with several common misconfigurations and vulnerabilities that an attacker can chain together to achieve full system compromise. Let's break down the attack surface using the MITRE attack framework. Technique TA0043 reconnaissance. Procedure T1595.002 active scanning, vulnerability scanning. Nmap is used to identify open ports and enumerate running services across the target host. Technique TA0001 initial access. Procedure T1190 exploit public-facing application. A squirrel mail webmail instance exposed on port 80 is targeted with brute-forced credentials to gain access to internal email communications. Procedure T1210 exploitation of remote services. An SMB share is accessed using credentials recovered from the compromised email account. Technique TA006 credential access. Procedure T1110.001 brute force password guessing. Burp Suite is used to brute force the squirrel mail login form using a word list recovered from an exposed SMB share. Technique TA002 execution. Procedure T1203 exploitation for client execution. A remote file inclusion vulnerability in the Kappa CMS installation is leveraged to load a remote PHP reverse shell and execute arbitrary command on the server. Technique TA004 privilege escalation. Procedure T1053.003 schedule task cron. A wildcard injection vulnerability in a root-owned cronjob script is abused to escalate privileges from www-data to root. The Skynet vulnerable host has been deployed and its IP address is visible in the TryHackMe dashboard. As always, the first phase of any penetration test is reconnaissance. The objective is to map the attack surface, what services are running, what versions are deployed, and where potential weaknesses may exist. I'll fire up Nmap with the command shown in the CLI. I've covered these flags extensively in previous videos, so I'll keep the explanation brief. The scan finishes and I have a solid set of results to work with. 6 ports are open. Port 22, SSH. SSH is present and operational. OpenSSH 7.2p2 is an older version, but I don't have credentials yet, so this isn't an entry point at this stage. I'll keep it in mind for later. Port 80, HTTP, an Apache web server is running. This is an obvious target for web enumeration, and I'll spend some time here. Port 110, POP3. A POP3 mail service is running. This indicates a mail server is present on this host, which is interesting from the credentials and data exposure perspective. Port 139, NetBIOS. NetBIOS is active, which tells me SMB file sharing is configured on this machine. Port 143, IMAP. IMAP is also running alongside POP3, further confirming a mail server is present. Port 445, Microsoft ES. SMB is running on this standard port. Samba shares are a common source of credential leakage and sensitive data in penetration tests. The OS detection confirms this is a Linux server, Ubuntu specifically. Based on the service banners returned during the scan, I've got a lot of interesting services to work with here. I'll work methodically, starting with SMB, then moving on to the web server. With Samba identified on port 139 and 445, the first thing I want to do is enumerate what shares are available and whether any of them allow anonymous access. I'll use Enum for Linux, a tool specifically designed for extracting information from Windows and Samba systems. The output details a lot of information, including several identified SMB shares on the target host. Print $, a standard printer driver's share, anonymous, an SMB share with no authentication required. This is immediately worth investigating. Miles Dyson, a share name after what appears to be a user account. This is noted for later. IPC $, a standard inter-process communication share. The anonymous share with no authentication is our priority. Let me connect to it and see what's inside. Before I continue, a quick primer on SMB. Server message block is a network communication protocol used primarily for sharing files, printers, and other resources between systems on a network. Here's what makes it relevant to penetration testing. Core functionality. SMB allows users and applications to read and write to files on a remote server and request services from server programs. It operates over TCP ports 139 and 445. Common misconfigurations. From a security perspective, SMB is notorious for misconfigurations. Null sessions, which are unauthenticated connections, can expose share listings, user enumeration, and sensitive files. Overly permissive share access controls can leak credentials, configuration files, and other sensitive data. Historical significance. SMB has been a target of some of the most damaging cyber attacks in history, including Eternal Blue, the exploit behind WannaCry and NotPetya. Even without exploiting the protocol itself, poorly configured SMB shares remain a reliable source of information during penetration tests. I'll run the following SMB client command shown in the CLI to connect to the anonymous share. In case you are wondering, SMB client is a command line tool included in most Linux distributions. When prompted for a password, I'll simply press enter to attempt an anonymous login. It appears that the anonymous login succeeded, as I see an SMB prompt. Based on the output of the ls command, I am now able to browse the contents of the share. I can see a file called attention.txt and a directory called logs. I ran the get command to download the attention.txt file for offline analysis. I ran the cd logs command to change directory to the logs directory. Then I ran the ls command to view the contents of the directory. Inside the logs directory, there are 3 files, log1, log2, and log3.txt. I ran the get command to grab all 3 of the text files for offline analysis. With the files downloaded, I started my review of the contents by running the cat command. The attention.txt file reads as a message from a user named Miles Dyson, referencing a password change following a security breach. This confirms the username Miles Dyson we saw earlier is a real account on this system. The log1 text file contains what appears to be a possible word list. This is the kind of exposed sensitive data that makes SMB enumeration so valuable. Log2 and 3 were pretty much empty. The log1 word list will be my primary password list for brute forcing. With a username and password list in hand, let me shift focus to the web server on port 80. Navigating to the target IP in the browser loads a page themed around Skynet. With a search interface, it's not functional, but it sets the theme nicely. I'll run the following GoBuster command shown in the CLI to discover hidden directories on the web server. Directory enumeration is a critical step in web application testing that reveals hidden administrator panels, configuration files, and other content not linked from the main page. GoBuster returns several interesting directories, /squirrelmail, a webmail application. This is significant given that I already know a mail server is running. /admin returns a 301 redirect, which is worth noting. /css and /js are standard asset directories, not particularly interesting, and /config, potentially sensitive. I'll check this later. The /squirrelmail result is the priority. A webmail interface combined with a known username and recovered password list is a textbook brute force scenario. SquirrelMail is an open-source PHP-based webmail client that provides browser-based access to email accounts via IMAP and POP3 protocols. Here's what's relevant from a security standpoint. Core functionality. It allows users to read, compose, and manage emails through a web interface without needing a dedicated email client. It's been around since the late 1990s, and while largely replaced by modern alternatives, it still appears on legacy systems. Security considerations. From a penetration testing perspective, SquirrelMail instances are interesting because they expose an authentication portal that can be targeted with credential brute forcing. They may contain sensitive internal communications once accessed, and older versions carry known vulnerabilities in the application itself. Finding a SquirrelMail instance on a target system often leads to credential discovery and internal information disclosure. Navigating to the target host's IP /SquirrelMail presents a standard login page. As noted earlier, SquirrelMail provides a good opportunity to initiate a brute force attack. I have the username Miles Dyson and the log1.txt word list recovered from the SMB share. In order to perform the brute force attack, I will need to set up my proxy. Lucky for me, Foxy Proxy is already set up on this system. I just need to enable it as shown on the screen. With Foxy Proxy enabled, it will allow me to use Burp Suite to intercept the login requests and identify the exact host parameters I need before attempting to brute force the SquirrelMail login. I have Burp Suite intercept on and Foxy Proxy configured to route traffic through it. I'll submit a test login attempt with dummy credentials to capture the request structure. The intercepted accepted request shows the login form submits to /squirrelmail/source/redirect.php with the parameters login_username and secret key. The failure condition in the server response is a redirect back to the login page. I think I have everything I need. I'll use Hydra to automate the brute force against the squirrel mail login using the following Hydra command shown in the CLI. Hydra returns a successful hit. Valid credentials for Miles Dyson account have been identified. I'll authenticate to Squirrel Mail using the correct credentials. The login was successful and I now have access to Miles Dyson's inbox. There are 3 emails in the inbox. I'll read through each one. The most interesting email is from the sender referencing a Samba password reset, and crucially it contains what appears to be a new password for the Miles Dyson SMB share. This is an excellent example of why compromising a mail account during a penetration test can unlock further access. Internal communications regularly contain credentials. With the password recovered from the email, I should now be able to access the Miles Dyson SMB share that required authentication earlier. I'll run the following SMB client command shown in the CLI. I get prompted to enter a password. I'll enter the password I obtained from the email. I received a prompt and I entered the ls command. Based on the output, authentication was successful, allowing me to browse the share, revealing several files in a directory called notes. I ran the following cd and ls commands to navigate into the notes folder and list the contents. Looking at the contents, there are several files, but only one file really sticks out, called important.txt. I ran the following get command to retrieve the important.txt file and review it on my system. Reviewing the contents of the important text file, it appears to reference a hidden directory path on the web server. I now have a specific URL path to investigate on the web server. Navigating to the hidden directory path that was revealed in the important.txt file loads what appears to be a personal web page for Miles Dyson. Nothing appears immediately exploitable on the surface. I'll run another targeted GoBuster scan against this specific subdirectory to look for additional hidden content underneath it. GoBuster discovers a /administrator directory within the hidden path. Navigating to it reveals a Kappa CMS login panel. This is a new attack surface, a content management system with its own set of known vulnerabilities. Kappa CMS is a lightweight open source content management system written in PHP. It's worth understanding why this matters from a security perspective. Core functionality. Like other CMS platforms, Kappa CMS provides a web-based interface for managing website content. It's relatively obscure compared to WordPress or Joomla, but it appears on systems where administrators have opted for a lightweight alternative. Known vulnerabilities. Kappa CMS has a well-documented and critical vulnerability, a remote file inclusion flaw in its alert config field.php component. This vulnerability, cataloged in exploit databases, allows an unauthenticated attacker to include and execute a remote PHP file hosted on an external server. Because no authentication is required to trigger this flaw, it represents a critical severity finding. Remote file inclusion, or RFI, is a class of web vulnerabilities that arise when an application dynamically includes file based on user-supplied input without sufficient validation. I ran the following search exploit command shown in the CLI to search exploit.db for the Kappa CMS exploit that may be published. It looks like search exploit results show a possible exploit. Rather than attempting to brute force the Kappa CMS login, I'll go directly to the known RFI vulnerability. I ran the following search exploit command to copy the exploit to the root folder for easier access. Reviewing the exploit, it provides a lot of detail about the exploit POC. It confirms the vulnerability and provides the exact vulnerable URL parameter. The exploit takes advantage of the URL config parameter in alert config field.php, which does not sanitize user input, allowing an attacker to supply a remote URL pointing to a malicious PHP file. As noted earlier, the URL config parameter is what gets exploited. The vulnerable URL structure looks like the following shown in the CLI. I'll use the first example that shows the path of the vulnerable parameter along with the external web source to retrieve the shell. I need to prepare a PHP reverse shell to host remotely. I already downloaded a reverse PHP shell from PentestMonkey's GitHub repo, and I just need to update the IP address and port to point back to my attack system. Next, I'll run my HTTP server so that the target can reach my reverse shell file. With my HTTP server running, I set up my netcat listener on port 1234 to catch the incoming reverse shell connection. Now I'll trigger the RFI vulnerability by running the following command shown in the browser. It will navigate to the vulnerable URL, pointing the URL config parameter at my HTTP server hosting my PHP reverse shell. Checking the Python HTTP server output confirms the target has made a GET request to my machine to pull down the reverse shell file. Switching to my netcat listener confirms that the connection has been cut. I ran the whoami command command to determine what account I am running as. The shell returns www-data, the Apache Web Server service account. This is a low privileged user. Before I attempt to escalate to root, I first want to stabilize the shell by running the following commands shown in the CLI. I ran the ls command to check what user accounts exist. There is one home directory belonging to the Miles Dyson user. I ran the following ls command shown in the CLI to check the contents of the Miles Dyson folder. Inside the Miles Dyson home directory, I can see the first flag file, user.txt. Let me read it. I ran the cat command shown in the CLI to read the user.txt file. The user flag is captured. Now let's focus on getting root. With an active foothold, I need to do some host enumeration in order to find an escalation path. A reliable approach for privileged escalation enumeration on Linux is reviewing scheduled tasks. Cron jobs running as root that execute scripts with insecure configurations are classic escalation paths. I ran the following cat command shown in the CLI to view the contents of the cron tab file. The cron tab file reveals an interesting entry. Every minute, root is executing a shell script located in /home/milesdyson/backups/backup.sh. Let me examine that script. I ran the following cat command to view the contents of the backup.sh script. The backup script contains the following contents shown in the CLI. This script changes directories into the web application's root directory and uses tar with a wildcard to create an archive. This is a textbook wildcard injection vulnerability. Let me explain why this is exploitable. Wildcard injection is a privileged escalation technique that exploits how Linux shells handle the asterisk wildcard character in commands. How it works. When a command uses a wildcard like tar cfbackup.tgz asterisk, the shell expands the wildcard to match all files in the current directory. Crucially, if a file name in that directory begins with a hyphen, the shell may interpret it as a command line option or flag rather than a file name. The tar checkpoint exploit. The tar command specifically supports --checkpoint and --checkpoint-action options, which allow it to execute arbitrary commands at defined intervals during archiving. By creating files in the target directory whose names match these flags, an attacker can inject arbitrary commands into a tar execution. And if the tar is running as root via a cron job, those commands execute with root privileges. Why this matters. This is a real-world technique documented in penetration test engagements. Any script running as a privileged user that called a command with an unquoted wildcard in a user-writable directory may be vulnerable to this class of attack. Returning to the backup script, I ran the cd command shown in the CLI to change directories to the web root. Since the backup script operates in /var/www/html and the www-data user has write access to the web root, I can plant the malicious files needed for wildcard injection. I ran the following command shown in the CLI to create a small shell script that copies /bin/bash to temp folder and sets the suid bit. With my shell script created, I ran the following command shown in the CLI to create the 2 file names that will be interpreted as a tar flag. Finally, with the 3 files created in the /var/www/html, I now just wait for the cron job to fire. It runs every minute, so the wait should be brief. After waiting a minute, I ran the ls command shown in the CLI to check the /temp directory to see if the root bash binary has been created. Looking at the output, I can see that the /temp/root bash binary is present and the suid bit is set. This is confirmed by the S in the permissions output. The cron job should have executed the payload as root. I'll execute the suid bash binary with the -p flag as shown in the CLI. This instructs bash to preserve the effective user ID rather than dropping to the real user ID. The first attempt gave me a text file busy message indicating the cron job was still in the process of executing the exploit. The second time around, the shell returned root. Privilege escalation is complete. I ran the command shown in the CLI to change directory to the root home folder and to display the contents. Looking at the output, I can see the root.txt file containing the final flag. I ran the cat command shown in the CLI to view the root.txt hash. The root flag is captured. Full system compromise has been achieved. Thank you for watching this walkthrough of TryHackMe's Skynet. I successfully executed the full attack lifecycle, starting with an nmap scan to map the attack surface, enumerating an anonymously accessible SMB share to recover a password word list, brute forcing a squirrel mail webmail instance, pivoting through internal emails to uncover additional credentials and hidden paths, exploiting a remote file inclusion vulnerability in Kappa CMS to land a reverse shell, and finally escalating to root through a wildcard injection flaw in a misconfigured root cron job. What makes this machine particularly valuable as a learning exercise is that every step requires chaining multiple findings together. No single vulnerability handed us root. I had to work through a kill chain methodically, letting each finding feed the next. That's the reality of real-world penetration testing. Thank you for also checking out the Cyber Overwatch channel. If you find this content informative and you are interested in cybersecurity, please like and subscribe to the Cyber Overwatch channel. If you have any questions, drop it in the comments or reach out through the Cyber Overwatch website linked in the description. Until next time, keep keep learning. The only way to improve is to keep learning. Pragmatic One, signing off.